Before every life ends, there is a moment, a breath, a whisper, a final sentence that slips into the silence. We spend our entire lives writing our own story. We labor over the first chapter, we struggle through the middle, but the final sentence, that's the one that hangs in the air forever. For some, these last words are wise. For others, painfully honest. And for a select few, they are unbelievably strange. They are a final joke, a last complaint, a sudden mystery, or a glimpse into a world we cannot see. Today, we dive into the final moments of legends, rulers, artists, and dreamers to discover the 33 weirdest, most unexpected last words ever spoken by famous people. Let's begin with the men who faced the void with one last joke, proving that even at the very end, wit can be the sharpest shield. Oscar Wilde, the brilliant playwright, was dying destitute in a cheap Parisian hotel. He was surrounded by peeling, gaudy wallpaper that he had long despised. Lying in that room he hated, he summoned his last bit of strength, looked at the wall, and said, "Either that wallpaper goes or I do." And then he went. A final act of defiance. A final piece of criticism. The wallpaper in the end won. Hollywood legend Humphrey Bogart, the icon of cool, was ravaged by esophageal cancer. But his spirit remained untouched. As he prepared for a final dose of morphine, he looked at his wife, Lauren Bacall, and his friends, and joked through his final breath, "I should never have switched from scotch to martinis." A last confession, soaked in his signature, dry humor. And then there's Groucho Marx, the master of the absurd. As he lay leaving the world, the comedian couldn't resist one final meta-joke, a complaint delivered to existence itself. This is no way to live. Humor, even at the very edge of death. But not everyone leaves with a laugh. Some leave with a fist raised, defiant against death, God, or even good manners. When Karl Marx, the father of communism, was on his deathbed, his housekeeper asked him if he had any wise last words for the world. He was not amused. He snapped back, "Last words are for fools who haven't said enough." Defiant and perfectly on brand, even against death. Generations earlier, the great skeptic Voltaire was being pestered by a priest at his bedside. The priest urged him to renounce Satan and reject the devil. Voltaire, ever the sarcastic, opened his eyes and replied, Now, my good man, this is no time for making enemies." Sarcastic to the last second, this defiance can also be terrifying. The Hollywood diva Joan Crawford, famous for her iron will, saw her nurse praying aloud at her bedside. In a final flash of her legendary temper, she snapped, "Don't you dare ask God to help me." No peace, no surrender, just one last, terrifying command. Then there are the goodbyes that reveal an unexpected and profound wait. The last words of geniuses who, at the end, only felt their own human limits. Winston Churchill once ruled the storm of war. He faced Hitler, reshaped nations, and carried the weight of the free world. But after a life of such thunderous volume, his end was a quiet sigh. He looked at his son-in-law and simply said, "I'm bored with it all." A man who survived everything, finally defeated not by an enemy, but by sheer exhaustion. Ludwig van Beethoven, the composer who created towering symphonies he could no longer hear, lay dying during a thunderstorm. After a life of struggle and transcendent art, he whispered, "Friends, applaud. The comedy is finished." A final bow from a silent genius. Was his life a tragedy or a comedy? He left us to debate it forever. But perhaps most shocking are the last words of Leonardo da Vinci, the mind behind the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper, the man who designed flying machines and understood human anatomy better than anyone, whispered on his deathbed, "I have offended God and mankind because my work did not reach the quality it should have." Even the greatest genius in history died thinking he wasn't good enough. A humbling, heartbreaking confession that echoes through time. For some, the end isn't emotional. It's practical. A final observation from a life spent analyzing the world. Benjamin Franklin, a founder, scientist, and wit, was struggling to breathe. His daughter asked him to shift in bed so he could breathe more easily. He managed to mutter, "A dying man can do nothing easy." Even death was just a final inconvenient problem he was trying to solve. This is never more true than for the French grammarian, Dominique Bouwers. As he was fading, he found the strength to correct his own final sentence. He whispered, "I am about to, or I am going to die." Either expression is correct. Grammar, until the very, very end, George Washington, after a painful throat infection, was dying with the same methodical calm he led his armies. He gave his final orders, checked his own pulse, and said calmly, "It is well. I die hard, but I am not afraid to go." A leader and a general, reporting on his own final battle. Even the artist Joseph Wright, who was famous for painting dramatic sunsets, simply stared ahead as the light in his room faded and whispered, "The sun is setting." It was the last thing he ever saw. A final, perfect, matter-of-fact observation. And then there are the last words that leave us with nothing but questions. The final riddles we will never solve. Thomas Edison, the man who invented the light bulb, had been in a coma. He suddenly opened his eyes one final time, looked upward at something no one else could see, and said clearly, "It is very beautiful over there." No one knows what he saw, but the man of science left with a vision of wonder. Over a century later, Apple founder Steve Jobs, another genius of innovation, was dying from cancer. His sister, who was in the room, said he stared past her, his gaze fixed, and said his last words with awe. "Oh wow, oh wow, oh wow." 3 quiet steps into whatever he saw next. The great physicist Richard Feynman, known for his boundless curiosity, was bored by the process of dying. As he lay in the hospital, he complained, "I'd hate to die twice. It's so boring." A scientist, curious and sarcastic, right to his last breath. But the most famous mystery belongs to Albert Einstein. As he lay dying, he spoke several sentences softly in German. But the nurse at his bedside didn't understand a word of German. His final words, his last equation, his ultimate secret, were spoken into a void and lost forever. Perhaps the universe wanted him to keep one last secret. This group of mysteries includes some of America's greatest icons. Lucille Ball, America's comedy queen, said her last strange phrase after heart surgery, "My Florida water." A brand of perfume? A memory of her youth? A mystery nobody has ever been able to explain. And Edgar Allan Poe, the master of the macabre, whose death is itself a mystery. He was found delirious on the streets of Baltimore, wearing another man's clothes. In the hospital, he muttered, "Lord, help my poor soul." His final mystery unsolved that I end the end. For all the fame and legend, many last words are simply human. Elvis Presley, exhausted and unwell in his Graceland mansion, said to his girlfriend, "I'm going to the bathroom to read." The king of rock and roll left quietly, in the most mundane human way possible. Marie Antoinette, the Queen of France, was being led to the guillotine, surrounded by a jeering mob. She accidentally stepped on her executioner's foot. Her final words were not about life or death, but about manners. "Pardon me, sir, I didn't do it on purpose." Grace and a bizarre normality, even while facing the blade. John Adams, a founding father, died on July 4, 1826. Thinking of his old friend and rival, he whispered, "Thomas Jefferson survives." He was wrong. In one of history's greatest ironies, Jefferson had died just hours earlier. 2 founders leaving on the same day. Frida Kahlo, the artist who lived a life of vibrant, agonizing pain, wrote her last words in her diary. "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return." Art, passion, and a final, desperate plea for freedom. Harriet Tubman, the woman who led so many to freedom, gathered her family and sang quietly, "Swing low, sweet chariot." A final journey in a final song. She wasn't dying, she was going home. And Nostradamus, the great prophet, he predicted kings, wars, and disasters. But his final prophecy was about himself. He told his secretary, "Tomorrow at sunrise, I shall no longer be here." He was right. From the profound to the practical, the poetic to the profane, these final words linger. Mozart, dying young. "The taste of death is upon my lips. I feel something that is not of this earth." Jane Austen, frail and fading. "I want nothing but death." No drama, only surrender. Pablo Picasso raising a glass. Drink to me. A final toast. Errol Flynn, the swashbuckler. I've had a hell of a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. No regrets. General George Patton, paralyzed after an accident. It's too damned late. A warrior frustrated by time itself. Charles Darwin, the man who explained life. I am not the least afraid to die. A final, calm observation. James Brown, the godfather of soul. I'm going away tonight. A final, simple performance. And Karl Lagerfeld, the king of fashion, exhausted from decades of work. One never knows. Maybe after death, I'll finally sleep well. Dreaming at last, of rest that I end the end. Last words reveal more than we expect. Courage, fear, humor, regret, wonder. They reveal that genius doesn't save you from regret, like Da Vinci. That a life of defiance lasts until the final second, like Voltaire. And that a life of humor gives you one last punchline, like Groucho Marx. Every life ends the same way. But the final sentence, that last whisper, is different for everyone. These were the 33 strangest, most human, and most unforgettable last words of famous people. Echoes from the edge of life, carried into history by a single final breath.